What is going on, everybody? It is week 16 fantasy football. We are all heading into it at this point. Honestly, I know this is kind of the time of the year where a lot of people check out in fantasy football. Obviously, if you didn't make the playoffs and, if you didn't advance to the next round, you lose interest naturally. That's normal. But for me personally, it just doesn't stop. I love this game so much. I love the game of football. And I love fantasy football. And so the reality for me is that you'll see me here all off season long. Still got big developments coming on Football Fanalysts Network. So there's going to be a lot more stuff to come this particular offseason. Really excited to show y'all what I've got coming up. So glad to see y'all in here today. I appreciate y'all being here. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel to show your support. It's going to be a normal question and answer at some point. Not at some point. We're doing it right now, but I really want to see a Pittman question. And I actually do see one because I do kind of want to discuss this Michael Pittman situation. But let's go ahead and just start diving through some questions right now. So the first question we've got up here, R. Dan Jr., what's going on, my man? Kevin and Waukee, I see y'all too. What's going on, you guys? R. Dan Jr. asks, what do you guys think of Olave? I'm very curious to see what the chat thinks, but to me personally, if I have Olave and if he plays, I'm playing Chris Olave. I mean, Chris Olave this particular week against the Buccaneers, it's a smash play. I mean, the Buccaneers have been honestly really bad defensively for most of the year. So if he plays, I'm playing him. It's not like if we were in a situation where it was Philadelphia or something like that, and it's like, well, there's two guys here, it makes that player a little less important to a point. But I would say that both A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith are both very important to their team. I think Olave is not as good as either of them, but I think he's just as important as both of them because the Saints don't have a clear answer at number two. I mean, I've said this for years now. Michael Thomas ended up performing better than I thought he would this year, but at the same time, my problem with Thomas is that this guy doesn't finish a season anymore. It's over. His body's just breaking down. That's how I'm starting to feel. That's how I'm feeling about Calvin Ridley. He's healthy, he's playing, but I mean, he's not doing very well. So it's the Saints don't have a clear number two. They've got Rashid Shaheed, who's a good deep threat, and he's definitely a good player in his role. And they've got A.T. Perry, who's just kind of waiting in the wings, and actually I think could do better if they gave him the opportunity. But they haven't given him the opportunity yet. So we're just in this Olave holding pattern where it's like, okay, if Olave plays, you just got to play him. That's just kind of the way I feel about Chris Olave right now. Next question was up here. Cameron Kaplan, what is going on? Mahomes, Fields, or Stafford? So yeah, this one is it's a situation where it's I think about this very logically with Mahomes right now. This is coming from someone who is a Texas Tech graduate. Reckham Tech, we're not very good at football. And even when we had Mahomes, we were not winning many games. Obviously, I love Mahomes. I think he's the best quarterback in the league. But there's no question. I've been saying it for a long time. With him, it's you're just limited with the upside as opposed to years prior because there's no real legitimate arsenal. Back in the day, it was Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce in their prime, right? That was a ridiculous arsenal he had. Well, now you've got Travis Kelce, who I don't, what my eyes are telling me when I watch him play is that he is not in his prime anymore. He's taken a step back this year. That's just the way I see things. So, I think that Mahomes just in a situation where it's hard to trust. Now, Fields is also hard to trust as well. I mean, Fields, even last week, you go back to last week and it was they were competitive against Cleveland, and Fields actually had some nice plays. But the same thing is always true with him, which is that him being prone to turnovers, which he is still it lowers that fantasy floor because he has, I think, a higher ceiling than Mahomes does. But I do think that their floors, like I think that Mahomes' floor is still higher than Fields because of the fact that, this is a guy who, doesn't really make many mistakes. So, and then Stafford this week, like Stafford, the matchup tomorrow versus the Saints is not ideal. I don't love Stafford off a short week, to be honest with you. Even though his weapons are firing in all cylinders, and I think his weapons are the best. Fantasy football for me on this channel, it's all about getting the upside. The upside for me is huge. So if I see what a player's upside is, and I determine that this player's upside is higher, and it's never just off the whim. Like Fields has shown the most upside out of all three of these guys. So I would go with Fields because you just can't play it scared. What's Mahomes' ceiling been this year? Like 25 points. Not bad, but that's not what Justin Fields is capable of. So I got to go with Fields this week because I just think that his upside is the highest out of all of them. R. Dan Jr., what's going on? I appreciate the super chat. RB's best two: Walker, Chandler, Jacobs, Roschon Johnson. So that's a great question. And by the way, running back rankings video out tomorrow. We will be out tomorrow along with the kicker rankings as well. So you guys will see both those tomorrow. This week, I kind of opened up the week by saying that I think that Kenneth Walker is a legitimate kind of sleeper guy, for not really a sleeper, but a wild card is the way I described him. I described him as a wild card because I look at this as a very unstable play this week, but as he displayed against the Eagles, high upside again. All of a sudden, the upside came back. And really, it's clear when you watch both him and Charbonnet play, like he's the better back. He's more explosive, and I just think has more talent as a player. I think Zach Charbonnet's a good player. I do. I think he is a good player. But Kenneth Walker is just more explosive. And so this particular week, for the Seahawks, going up against I was going to say the Steelers. That's week 17. They're going up against the Titans. Still a great matchup, right? Like the matchup is definitely there for Kenneth Walker. Out of all your choices, he's my favorite. Now, Ty Chandler obviously is – if it wasn't for James Cook, Ty Chandler would have been the guy that everyone was like just screaming about this week. It would have been led by me because I advanced in a dynasty league because I had the stones to play him. And I'm not trying to like brag on that. I'm just saying like there's a lot of things there for that situation to happen. You might be shocked about his ranking in tomorrow's video. I'll leave it at that. Alexander Madison, his presence definitely makes it more complicated for me. I don't know what their plan is, if he's going to go back to being the main guy and Ty Chandler gets 10 touches again, or if they just see that Ty Chandler is going to be the guy. I mean, here's what we do know. He gave that team a shot of life running the ball, and they desperately needed it. I mean, they need a shot of life running the ball. So the fact that he came in and dominated for them on the ground, over 130 yards rushing, it was really impressive. And I've also seen that the Minnesota Vikings do plan on making him the featured back. So for what that's worth, and I always say for what that's worth, because as the NFL season goes on, and there's been several examples of it this year, where NFL teams will say things specifically about their running backs that would make you think like a change is coming, right? So several weeks back, this was over a month ago at this point, Mike Tomlin named Najee Harris or Jalen Warren the starter over Najee Harris. You know what changed? Absolutely not a thing. Not a thing. Starter in name only. So I just don't think that you can count on coach speak when it comes to running backs across the league. Roschon Johnson was the guy that he was kind of a wild card for me this week as well. I can't trust him. I would rather play Ty Chandler over Roschon. And then Josh Jacobs, if he plays this week, he's going in my lineup. Against the Chiefs, the matchup is a push. I don't really think it's a positive. I don't think it's a negative. the Chiefs are obviously fighting for seeding right now in the playoffs, and really the Raiders don't have much to play for. So I don't think that the Raiders are going to roll over at this point in the season. I do think they are playing for pride because I do think that, look, you could say a lot of things about, whether Antonio Pierce, the interim head coach, will be the head coach next year. I don't think it's debatable that he does seem to care, that his players do seem to care about him and want to play for him. So I think that Josh Jacobs, if he plays, has to be back in. I don't see a world where he gets less than 17 to 18 opportunities this week. So I would go with Jacobs and I would go with Walker. And again, I appreciate the super chat, R. Dan Jr. Nate Dogg, what is going on, my man? Good to see you in here tonight. Should I drop D'Onta Foreman for Parker Washington or Chase Brown? Trevor Lawrence or Jake Browning to start? You think Tyreek Hill will play? So the first part of that question, I remember we had actually, Nate Dogg, we had actually chatted on Patreon about this one. And I replied to this one a little bit earlier today. So for me, D'Onta Foreman definitely does have upside in the Chicago Bears backfield, I think. What really, the thing that bothers me the most about this Bears running backfield is week to week, I have no idea who's going to be the guy. It's a different guy every week. You know what? Before week 15, it was D'Onta Foreman. This time, D'Onta Foreman had 6 carries, negative yardage. -6 yards. Wild. Khalil Herbert, 6 carries. Same exact number, 8 yards. Roschon Johnson, 5 carries, 35 yards. So this is like an even 3-way split. I just don't see trust with D'Onta Foreman. I mean, yes, he has upside. He has shown it throughout the years. But realistically, the way I like to think about this one is like, think of the scenarios where you could see yourself playing D'Onta Foreman. When I think about that, I think to myself, the only way I could see myself playing D'Onta Foreman is if all of my both my top 2 starters were out, and also only if there was Roschon Johnson injury or a Khalil Herbert injury and it was 2 of them. When they're all there, I've got no trust whatsoever in D'Onta Foreman. Now, the guy that I really do think has both of these players have upside. Parker Washington, Chase Brown. So Chase Brown is someone I'm definitely interested in. I think that his role is a revelation, and I think it's important. And especially now without Jamar Chase there, I think it becomes even more important. So I do think that there is definite upside there for Chase Brown to stick. But I actually feel very similar about Parker Washington. Parker Washington is someone that I'm very big on. For those of you who don't know either of them, both these guys, rookies that were low draft picks. I mean, they were both 5th, 6th round guys. Parker Washington out of Penn State, Chase Brown out of Illinois. Scouted both of them in my rookie draft guide, and actually both of those guys for me above consensus. I liked both of them. So I've got, I think that if Zay Jones was not injured, I don't think I would go with Parker Washington, because I do think that Zay Jones does leave behind. I mean, it's obvious that he's leaving behind a lot of targets, and they've got no Christian Kirk anymore. So at this point, you're just looking at Calvin Ridley, who has been peppered with targets the past 2 weeks, over 25 targets last 2 weeks, has made very little of it. And then you've got Parker Washington, who actually, when you watch him, he does more work with what he gets than Calvin Ridley does. So I actually think that Parker Washington is the guy I prefer here, because I don't think we'll see Zay Jones again, at least in the regular season. Dude pulled a hammy and he's been dealing with a knee problem. For those of you who are in the medical world, when you have knee issues, hamstring issues tend to follow. So I don't think he's been right all year, and I think there's a good chance they shut him down. So I think Parker Washington's the guy. Trevor Lawrence or Jake Browning this week, the thing is that I think that both of their matchups are good. It's so funny. The Steelers, I just went on kind of a rampage on them on Monday night. If you didn't see my what I got right and what I got wrong live stream. I kind of went off on the Steelers a little bit. And I think they deserve it, but I also do think that I have to take a step back and look at it logically and say to myself, okay, it's a divisional matchup. Divisional matchups always bring tons of uncertainty. The Steelers also beat the Bengals with Jake Browning in his first start. Now, that was his first start. So he's obviously looked, 10 times better the previous month than he did when he played the Steelers the first time. So I do think that Jake Browning has definitely improved. And I actually do think that Trevor Lawrence is going to struggle without Christian Kirk and Zay Jones now. Calvin Ridley being your number one guy, I don't think it's ideal. But Jake Browning's got the same problem. Jamar Chase is out. He's already been ruled out this week. So it's really close. I'll be honest with you. They're very close to my rankings. And Nate Dogg, you'll see the quarterback rankings here soon. On Patreon, for those of you possibly interested in Patreon. I know you would enjoy it. I know you'd get the value out of it. There's a link in the description. So they're very close to my rankings. There is an answer for me here, and it is going to be Mr. Trevor Lawrence, only because of the fact that I think that against the Buccaneers, it's an out-of-division matchup, out-of-conference matchup. They don't have as much familiarity with each other, whereas the Steelers know, what the Bengals are doing. And they're not, as good as Jake Browning's been, he's not Joe Burrow. And the Steelers proved that the first time they played him. Tyreek Hill, do I think he's going to play? I think he's going to play this week. Yeah, early indications from what I'm seeing is that he's going to play. The fact that they left it up to him last week on whether or not he was going to play kind of told me that he said, I could play if I felt like we were in trouble. I feel like we're going to win this game, though. So, maybe that was part of the decision. Maybe not, right? Like, I have no idea whether that was part of the real decision, but I do think it's worth noting that they destroyed the Jets last week. So it's like Tyreek Hill didn't need to do that. They're playing the Cowboys this week. They need to win because they're trying to secure. They're not trying to secure it. They're trying to compete for that number one seed. If they can get the number one seed, that changes the game for the Dolphins, and they know it. They're a better team at home than on the road. So, yeah, I think that Tyreek's going to play this week. I don't think that if they ruled him out last week, I would have more uncertainty. But the fact that they left it up to him to decide, hey, man, let us know how you're feeling, and we'll go from there. I think that kind of shows me that he's going to play. So, again, I appreciate you being here, Nate Dogg, and I appreciate the super chat. Kuniam, what's going on? I appreciate the super chat. Let me try to find your question. What's your opinion on playing Dallas Goedert and Devonta Smith? So, obviously, I'm assuming that you're meaning in the same team. And, it's tough right now. Like, ordinarily, if you asked me this question week 5, week 6, week 7, I would have been like, yeah, do it. Because Devonta Smith was just like coming off a hot stretch, had a little bit of a down stretch during that time. But, Dallas Goedert was getting hot. And so, if we were back then, I would say, why not? If those are your best options. Right now, I'm nervous. I am. I don't think – I've been saying this for weeks. I don't think Jalen Hurts is fully healthy. And, that was evident because he was basically a game-time call on Monday night. He ended up playing, but if you watch him, this guy he just doesn't look right. And I love Jalen Hurts. I'm a big Jalen Hurts fan. I think when he's healthy, a top quarterback in this league. Up there in the class with like Joe Burrow, Josh Allen. Really, I do think that Jalen Hurts is there. I think that Devonta Smith is always going to be a start-worthy player to me because of the fact that he himself is a great player. Like when the Eagles last year, when they were big on like we've got two Batmans here, I believe it. Like I do think they have two Batmans. I think you could put Devonta Smith on 31 other teams, and he'd be not 31. I guess you wouldn't put him on Miami or Dallas, and he'd be the number one. But I think you put him on a lot of teams and be the number one. I think he'd be a better number one than T. Higgins. That's for sure. So, I'm oftentimes going to start him. Dallas Goedert, I'm still not fully bought in right now. So it really does depend on who you've got at tight end. I would definitely say starting Devonta Smith is a move I feel very comfortable with saying you can do. Because you look at it and it's like his ceiling is astronomically high, 30 points. And his floor, while it wasn't exactly high at the beginning of the year when he kind of had that down stretch, it's gotten much larger. So I think that ultimately it comes down to who you've got at tight end. If you were able to pick up Trey McBride, I would say definitely play Trey McBride. He's a locked and loaded top 3 tight end for me right now. Again, those of you with Patreon, you'll see the tight end rankings soon as well. But I do think that wide receiver Devonta Smith, you could definitely play him with confidence. With Dallas Goedert, I mean, there's definitely got to be some questions I need answered as far as who your other options are at tight end, because I don't think that it's a certainty that I would say to go ahead and play Dallas Goedert. If you've got options like, I said Trey McBride, obviously. David Njoku, I'd play him over Dallas Goedert. I would play I think the line for me with him is Jake Ferguson. I do. I think I would play him over Jake Ferguson. That's kind of the line for me, though. I think that there's a lot of guys who can be played over him. I probably would play him over Jake Ferguson, though. And again, I appreciate the super chat. Kevin S., what is going on? Appreciate you being here. New to the channel, love it. Well, I appreciate you being here. Full PPR, pick 2. Kenneth Walker, Ty Chandler, Devin Singletary, and Devon Achane. Drop Zeke for Denver defense. What's your take? Chase out, had to play Deontay Johnson and Debo. Well, Debo, you're going to play anyways. Having to play Deontay Johnson is definitely that's a bummer for sure. Like I don't have any confidence in any Pittsburgh Steeler right now. So that I feel you on that one. So if you've got to play a guy like that, with the context of you've got one high ceiling guy, Debo Samuel, 35-point ceiling, like that is a good thing because you're going to need that with a lower floor guy like Deontay Johnson or a lower ceiling guy. Like his floor is actually relatively okay. Like his floor is like in half PPR, like 8 or 9 points, full PPR, probably like 10 or 12. Right. So you've got a pretty good ceiling, a pretty good floor there with Deontay. What you need to do, and what I always say on this channel, since you're new to this channel, is I play fantasy football to win. And you don't win by not playing the upside. That's how I've won, dozens and dozens of fantasy championships over a decade span. So, I think that with your options here, Kenneth Walker definitely is going to be one of them because he showed this ceiling again this past week against the Philadelphia Eagles. And they get the Titans, who, from a run perspective, maybe not an inferior opponent, but definitely from a defensive perspective, I would say they're right on the level or probably worse than the Eagles. And the Eagles are bad defensively right now. Bad. So I would play Kenneth Walker for sure. And I got to go with Achane. Look, I get it. Like a couple weeks ago, I remember this vividly because I was like, I kind of laughed to myself a little bit because about a month ago, I was ranking Raheem Mostert really consistently over Devon Achane. And I caught, some comments from several people were like, you're an idiot. Achane should never be lower than Mostert. And it's like, well, listen, you look at it, you look at the numbers this year. I'm not just speaking an opinion on this one. When Devon Achane is there, Raheem Mostert is excellent in fantasy football. That's not an opinion. That's a fact. So it's just kind of interesting to see where we've come to that point because it's like Achane, I say this kind of, I don't say this as much as I used to, but what I always used to say on this channel was fantasy football is so much like the stock market. Like you have your blue chip stocks, Christian McCaffrey, Tyreek Hill, CD Lamb, guys like that where it's like every week, even if they have a bad week, they're not losing value, right? Like they're just, it's just a bad day. Then you've got, your guys with the upside that, you've got your stocks with the upside that are a little bit unstable. It's like, I see all the potential in this company and they can really, really take control and just shoot to the moon. But if they're not disciplined on the details, they could easily crash. That's kind of where Devon Achane feels right now. And I don't even think that it's fair to say he could crash. Like Devon Achane is like, if you look at the past couple weeks for Achane, they just haven't been the upside games. Like his floor, what he's proving right now is not low. The floor is like 8 to 7 fantasy points, right? So it's like, it could be a lot worse than that because when you combine that with the ceiling he's got, it's through the roof, right? It's higher than a guy like Ty Chandler, who just had a great game. It's higher than a guy like Singletary, who also just had a great game. With Achane, though, I say this a lot on this channel. There's no way I can look myself in the mirror the next day if I tell my audience or I myself sit a guy with that kind of upside and he goes off on my bench for 3 touchdowns at over 100 plus scrimmage yardage. I just can't do that. Because I know that beforehand, I knew he could do it. I don't feel as confidently about any of the other 2 guys doing that. So I would go with Devon Achane here as the other guy. And the other part of the question was drop Zeke for Denver defense. What's my take? So I think this one largely depends on how you feel about your running back room right now. Because when I look at it and I see you've got 2 high upside guys, Walker and Achane, I would say floors for both of them relatively unstable. Kenneth Walker might get back to having a pretty good floor, but right now he kind of came right out hot this past week against the Eagles. So it's like we see that his ceiling is back, which is awesome. But where is his floor at right now? Is he going to go back to having 9 touches per game and they split the backfield again? Or is he going to be the guy who gets 16 carries per game? Because if that's the guy, I feel really comfortable with that. But then you've got 2 high upside running backs right now with Ty Chandler and Singletary. I would say this, I'm confident in Singletary moving forward because they eliminated Dameon Pierce from the game plan last week. He was irrelevant. 1 carry for last week for Dameon Pierce. Devin Singletary, and I think they made the right move, by the way. I think Houston made the right move, pivoting to Devin Singletary. So I actually believe in Devin Singletary a little bit more than I believe in Ty Chandler right now because I worry about when Alexander Mattison returns, what is this offense going to do? Are they going to go back to a timeshare? Because that's what happened when Dameon Pierce came back. For those first couple weeks, they were splitting touches again, him and Singletary. So I personally feel confident to say that, if you're deep, it also depends on your defense this week. Because to me, if your defense is in a spot where you've got the Bears defense, right, who, if you haven't seen my defense ranking video, they were 1 spot ahead of Denver this week. I think they're both great this particular week. If you even got a defense like the Colts, right, like this week, I'd still play the Colts. My point on defense is that I don't really like to go out of my way to drop a defense that is 1 spot lower than the defense I could pick up if I see the upcoming matchup so great. And this week for Denver is great, but even next week is even better. So for me, I think Denver's a smash play 2 weeks in a row. I personally feel comfortable doing this. I would drop Zeke for Denver's defense personally because number 2 defense for me this week, or number 3 defense for me this week, and I think that next week, they've got a shot for number 1. We'll have to see how they perform. They just got ripped apart by the Lions. We cannot forget that, but that was the Lions. This week, they're taking on the Patriots. I would personally do it for myself. I think the upside is there for 2 straight weeks. And again, I appreciate the super chat, Kevin S. Andrew, what is going on? I appreciate the super chat. Let me find your question, Andrew. Trying to find your question, Mr. Andrew. Half PPR, need 2 running backs and a flex. Achane, Javonte, Eckler, Amari, Ty Chandler, Noah Brown probably need upside plays. Thanks, man. So what I would say is that, it's good that your mentality is like mine, which is that you need upside. And I would say upside, upside, upside every week is what wins fantasy championships. That's the rule of them I have used to win, like I said, dozens and dozens. So I'll always advocate that my audience goes for upside. I think that with you saying that you need upside, Achane's a no-brainer, right? Like, you have to go with Achane as one of your running backs at the very least. Upside is definitely there with Achane. We just discussed it. Now, the other guy is tough because you're going to see how low Eckler falls in my running back rankings video tomorrow. So make sure to stay tuned. Watch that running back rankings video tomorrow when it comes out. You're going to see how low he falls for me. Man, I'll let y'all listen to that video. Just watch the video, see what I think, because I have very little confidence in Eckler. I don't think his upside is very high. So I no longer think of Eckler as an upside play. I think he's kind of a play that you make if you're – I don't want to spoil tomorrow's video too much, but I think that Eckler honestly is a play that you make if you're in – running back 2 territory and you're deciding between like him and Aaron Jones. I do think so. So I don't see Eckler's upside right now. And I don't think any of y'all do. I mean, I'd be curious to know if there's still people who are comfortably keyword riding Eckler right now. Comfortably. Javonte, it was so funny about Javonte Williams that the irony of Javonte last week is that numbers-wise, you look at the box score, it wasn't good. If you watch that game, he didn't look good. But you know what? He got robbed of a touchdown. He was in the end zone. Even the rules announcer said it during the game. The rules announcer was like, yeah, he's in the end zone. Why are they not ruling this a touchdown? So I don't think that, obviously we don't have the concerns of Javonte. But, I mean, Javonte just hasn't had upside all year. It's tough, man, because I have to go with Javonte over Eckler as my running back too. And then your flex option here, it's between Cooper and Eckler and Ty Chandler, because I do think that, Cooper obviously every week has upside. The story really for me doesn't change with Amari Cooper, even though he's so inconsistent. I feel very much like I've got a really good feel for Amari Cooper. And my feel for Amari Cooper is that this is a player who is capable of dominating a game. Like he did last week. 100-plus yards, touchdown on 4 catches. Gets a great fantasy week. He's capable of that any week. I don't care who they play. I don't care who you play. So I think that, with Amari Cooper, it's like upside's always there. Question is, are you willing to take the shot? Because to me, when I look at your other options, Noah Brown with looking like, by the way, no CJ Stroud again in this week. That's not good. Now, obviously, he did it last week with Case Keenum. I understand, could do it again. They're playing the Browns this week. That's a tougher matchup right there. I think that, honestly, with Cooper versus Eckler, I would take Cooper's upside personally. And with Ty Chandler over Cooper, I would personally play Amari Cooper because, like I said, I worry about what happens if Alexander Mattison returns this week. Again, my worries may very well be stupid. I may come out of this the other side and say it was pointless to worry about this one, right? But I'm not there right now. And I do really worry about what happens. Does this Vikings offense decide they want to go back? I'm kind of leaning towards no, but I want to see some more proof. before I stack Ty Chandler up against the guy like Amari Cooper and Austin Eckler and say I'd play him over both. I wouldn't play him over Eckler either. I personally wouldn't. So I would play Amari Cooper out of those options. I'd play Achane, Javonte, and Amari Cooper for the upside plays. And again, I appreciate the super chat, Andrew. Kent, what is going on? What is going on today? Let's find your question. Kent, where you at, my man? Kent, I can't. Oh, nope, I found you. Please help. 18 full PPR, 2 quarterbacks. Team is Josh Allen, Kyler, Minshew. CMC, Kyron, Gibbs, Zeke. Lamb, Diggs, Rice, McBride, Ferguson. Browns defense and Eagles defense. Tyler Bass and Bucker. What should my lineup be? So 18 full PPR, 2 quarterback league. You've got to start Josh Allen for sure. Josh Allen, another must-win game. Awesome matchup. Great matchup versus the Chargers this week. You play Josh Allen. Floor is what we saw last week. So you definitely play Allen. Between Kyler and Minshew, Minshew obviously had a better fantasy game than Kyler last week. I'd go with Kyler this week. Kyler Murray against the Bears, not an ideal matchup. I guess I can't hitch my wagon to Gardner Minshew week to week. Like, he's not very good. He's just not a good player. I think that he's he's on a great offense run by a great offensive-minded coach, Shane Steichen. And I think he's got weapons. Now, without the potential of Michael Pittman this week, I don't like that. So I would go with Kyler personally as the second quarterback. Christian McCaffrey, obviously, you play him. Kyron Williams, you obviously play him as well. Lamb, Diggs, you play those guys. McBride, I would play him over Ferguson because, like I said, I think McBride's top 3 tight end right now. I mean, if you look at this Cardinals team, especially stacking with Kyler, because if you look at this Cardinals team, what you see from the wide receiver production over the last month or so, it's very minuscule. Spotty at best. Rondale Moore, big play here or there. Marquise Brown, 1 decent game. And by the way, he's now probably going to be out. Michael Wilson, been injured for a long time. So I think that there's just a lot of uncertainty with this Arizona Cardinals wide receiver room. Trey McBride is the primary option. I love Trey McBride does not go on your bench. And last week, I told people to flex him over a lot of guys. I think Trey McBride is easily flexible because they're treating him like a wide receiver at this point. I mean, he's in Sam Laporta territory. He's in, Travis Kelce, TJ Hawkinson territory for me. That's exactly where McBride is right now. So McBride can't go on the bench. The flex I would pick right here is I would go with Gibbs because I think that Gibbs extremely high upside. And I said this kind of last week is that Jahmyr Gibbs is the guy that won't go on my bench in the fantasy playoffs. Upside is just too high. You saw it last week, and even the week before, he had another good week. So Gibbs doesn't go on the bench. Browns or Eagles defense, I definitely go with the Browns this week. I need to see it to believe it first when it comes to the Eagles. It's tough because I do think the Eagles are in a good position here this week. But I just trust the Browns defense more. And especially, like I said, with the it's a probability at this point that Houston is without CJ Stroud this week. And Cleveland is playing Houston, so that matters. So I would go with the Browns defense here. I think they've got a good upside play. And this week, I think that Bucker is my play over Tyler Bass. Tyler Bass, I think that they're going to have their way with the Chargers defense. And so I don't think that they're going to need to kick a ton of field goals. At best, I see him getting, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if they put 6 touchdowns on the board. And he gets 6 extra point attempts, 6 fantasy points for extra points, and then maybe a field goal of who knows how long. Maybe a field goal. He could possibly get to 8 points or something like that. I think Bucker this week against the Raiders, divisional matchup. I love divisional matchups for kickers. Always uncertainty there. And Kansas City has not been a smooth sailing ship offensively. Bucker has been great. He has only missed 1 kick this year extra points and field goals, except for last week. Butker to me is the play at kicker right here. So I would go with Josh Allen, Kyler at your quarterback position, McCaffrey, Kyron at the running backs, Lamb, Diggs at the wide receiver position, McBride at the tight end, Browns defense, and Harrison, Butker in your lineup right there. And again, appreciate the super chat. Appreciate you being here as well. Marcus Shepard, what's going on? See the question above. Need some help. Half PPR, Fields or Purdy at quarterback. 2 running back, 3 wide receiver, 1 flex. Kamara, Henry, Mixon, Walker, Hill, Ayuk, Kupp, Addison. Who are we starting? So great question, honestly, because I think that this is a situation where it's just like, when it comes to quarterbacks right now, I just kind of, earlier in this live stream, I said that Justin Fields has upside. Like, there's no question that he has tremendous upside. And from week to week, I worry about his floor. So like what we saw last week and what he gave you last week, depending on your scoring format, 10 fantasy points, that's just not good enough in the playoffs. You can't afford to have your quarterback get 10 fantasy points. Brock Purdy, I've been saying this for weeks, if the NFL is honest, Brock Purdy is a legit MVP candidate alongside Dak Prescott. And I think Christian McCaffrey. I think it's a 3-horse race between those 3. I honestly do. I don't. And the reason I say if they're honest is because I do believe that, there's a notion here with Brock Purdy that you see in the mainstream corporate media, of people that are like, well, he's such a late round pick. It's got to be because his team's so strong. Listen, you're not like, if you think that way, you're not wrong that they have great weapons and a great offense. There's no question. But look at what Jimmy Garoppolo did with the 49ers and look at what he's doing now. So it's like Jimmy Garoppolo had like the beginning part of that team. They didn't have McCaffrey, but they had Debo back then. They had Ayuk. They had Kittle. They had the defense. They had the offensive line. They had everything. Brock Purdy's great. And honestly, like, I get it. The matchup is tough this week for him against the Ravens. Listen, when a guy is playing on an MVP level, how can you sit him? Like, think back to Lamar Jackson's MVP year, right? Like, Lamar Jackson is obviously a different player. He adds the rushing element in his MVP year. Unreal in fantasy football, right? Like, if you were playing fantasy football back in 2019, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Think back to when Mahomes won the MVP. Mahomes last year was excellent weekly in fantasy football. You never thought about sitting him, right? I don't think that if you've got a player who is, in my opinion, playing on if you've got a player playing on this type of a level, I just can't sit him. I think his upside is just as high as Justin Fields, but I think his floor is a lot higher. So I got to go with Brock Purdy here as the quarterback. And 2 running backs, I would go with, there's a lot of good options here. I would go with Walker because I love the upside against the Titans and what we saw. And I would also go with Kamara here because I think that, listen, like Alvin Kamara is the perfect example this year of like why volume oftentimes is king. Like, he doesn't just get at most 20 carries or at most 20 total touches. This guy gets like close to 30 touches per week. It's crazy. And like, he hasn't been that efficient. He hasn't been inefficient, but it's not like the efficiency numbers are through the roof right now with Alvin Kamara. It's not like he's Jahmyr Gibbs out here, right? Like, Jahmyr Gibbs is the new Alvin Kamara, but Kamara is still a dog. He's still a dog. And you know what? He plays a great matchup versus the Rams. Rams are not a good defense. Been saying it for a long time. So I really like Kamara this week on Thursday night, especially if the possibility with Noah Olave. I'll take a Kamara any day. Wide receivers, obviously you're going to go with Tyreek Hill if he plays. If he plays 100%. If he doesn't play, I would go with Ayuk, Kupp, and Addison, obviously. But if he does play, it's got to be Hill and Ayuk and Kupp. Like, I get it. And actually, it's probably a good time to address Jordan Addison because I got a lot of questions about why would you not have Jordan Addison in your top 30 wide receiver rankings? Top 30 wide receiver rankings for week 16 was out yesterday. If you haven't seen it yet, go check it out after this live stream. Yeah, Jordan Addison, I think that he's a great player. Like, you're never going to catch me talking bad about Jordan Addison. If you were with me back in the offseason when I still had like 2,500 subscribers, first of all, I appreciate it. And second of all, Jordan Addison was one of my favorite prospects. I vehemently defended his ranking as the number 2 wide receiver in this class above Quentin Johnston when everyone else jumped ship after the NFL Combine when he measured into like 5'11 and 170 pounds. I vehemently defended his number 2 ranking. I love Jordan Addison. I think he's a great player. From the start, it was clear to me that he was a better prospect and a better pro player than Quentin Johnston would be. So I'm not surprised at all to see that he's doing great. What it falls down to with me for Jordan Addison in this particular situation is I'm looking at a guy who is dealing with a backup quarterback in a divisional matchup versus the Lions, who are trying to lock up the division here. You've got Cooper Kupp trying to secure a playoff spot against the secondary that's not fantastic matchup-wise, but Cooper Kupp is back. I mean, several straight weeks now of great production. So I trust Cooper Kupp more than I trust Addison. And I think that Addison's upside is high. I think Cooper Kupp's is as high. And again, it's kind of a Brock Purdy, Justin Fields situation where it's like, I actually think that Jordan Addison on any given week, like we saw last week, has the upside of a Cooper Kupp. But the floor for Cooper Kupp is higher. The floor right now, I think, is higher. So I don't see a way where I could say start Addison over Cooper Kupp because I just don't think his floor is there. So when it comes to your one flex option, I think that really, it will come down to Addison and Mixon because, for upside purposes here, like, I don't think that Mixon's like, and I probably am going to sound dumb saying this because he's had upside. I don't think it's consistently as high every week. Like, Mixon's the type of player that it's like, you can see that he's losing volume. Like, and it's not because he's been bad. Like, Mixon has done well with less work. When they've given Chase Brown the ball, Mixon has been more efficient getting in the end zone. So Chase Brown just kind of adds a new wrinkle to this offense, and he's an important role player at this point, one that they actually do need. So I don't think that Chase Brown really does have like a tremendous impact on Joe Mixon's floor Joe Mixon's floor or ceiling. Because I do think that Joe Mixon, when you look at him the past several weeks with Chase Brown involved, has been good. Jordan Addison, if you're looking for upside, I would say you could play Addison over Mixon. I like Mixon. I would personally play Mixon over him myself because they're taking on the Steelers. And like I said, the Vikings are taking on a Lions team that's looking to lock up the division this week. So I would personally play Mixon over Jordan Addison, but I can totally understand the argument of wanting to go with Addison because while I say that, I do think that Jordan Addison's ceiling is probably slightly higher, but his floor to me is drastically lower than Joe Mixon's. So when it's that close for a ceiling play, if they're that close, if I view them as like a 2-point difference in ceiling, like if I view Mixon's ceiling at 27, 28 fantasy points, and I view Addison's at 30, it's like, okay, they're very close. So what the determining factor for me personally, where I go into fantasy football weeks is what's the disparity between the floor? Because if Joe Mixon's floor is 12 fantasy points and Jordan Addison's at like 5, that's a big difference for me. So that's exactly how I feel about Jordan Addison. And I would personally go with Mixon over him, but I do understand the desire to play Jordan Addison off the type of week that he just had for the upside. So that would be Mixon would be my guy I went with, but I could definitely understand that argument. And again, I appreciate the super chat, Mr. Marcus Shepard. Cindy Johnson, what is going on? Patron member, appreciate you being here. So let's see what you've got. Gus Edwards or Ty Chandler and dump Eckler. Ooh, dump Eckler is a very strong suggestion here, Cindy. This is a good question. Honestly, and Cindy, I don't know if you saw, but before I went live a couple hours ago, put up my top 50 running back rankings. For those of you interested in Patreon, there's a link in the description. Cindy, I appreciate you being a patron. And you probably may have seen my ranking on Eckler. And again, I've got that video coming out tomorrow, so everyone else will see where my top 30 running backs fall and where Eckler falls. Because Eckler, to me, is a guy that I have zero confidence in anymore. Like, I don't just have low confidence, I've got no confidence. Does that mean that he can't put up a 20-point week? I don't think it means that. I still do think there's a world where Eckler can do that. Do I think it's nearly as likely? Of course not. Of course not. But do I think it's possible? Yes, I do. I do, because he's still – look, it didn't work out last week, but I do stand by the premise of which I was attacking what I felt about Eckler last week, which is that backup quarterback, this guy is not good. We just saw it last week. The chances that Eckler gets a bunch of dump-offs is relatively high. It didn't happen last week, like I said. I think it possibly happens this week, though. So I would not say I would drop Eckler yet. I don't think I would dump him. But Gus Edwards and Ty Chandler, for me, obviously Gus Edwards' story changes again. J.K. Dobbins, for those of you who even remember this far back into the season, week 1, J.K. Dobbins torn Achilles. It was like, okay, time for the Gus Edwards show, right? So he has several straight games of just ripping off massive performances because of touchdown upside, and then he doesn't get in the end zone these past several weeks, and it's like, why are we playing Gus Edwards? Well, obviously now, unfortunately, this one's really unfortunate to me, actually. Keaton Mitchell, for those of y'all who may not have heard, is out for the season, torn ACL. Complete tear of the ACL, he's done. So that's a huge bummer for the Ravens and for us as fantasy managers. It makes Gus Edwards 100% relevant, though. But you know what else? He's taking on the 49ers this week. And actually, my take on the 49ers playing defense against them for a running back kind of got squashed a little bit last week by James Conner, who actually ended up putting up a really good fantasy performance against the Niners. I don't think Gus Edwards is as good as James Conner, first of all. And I also still don't think that, listen, they tried all season to get the ball out of Gus Edwards' hands. At most, he handles, I'm talking at most 16 carries. And that's like a one-time thing. This guy usually handles 12 carries. And the past several weeks with Keaton Mitchell's emergence, about 6 to 8 carries. Obviously, that number is going to go up, probably back to like 12 to 14. So if he doesn't get in the end zone, that guy is not going to get you a big upside game because he doesn't get dump-offs. So I don't think that this matchup is good for Gus Edwards here. Ty Chandler, I would play him over Gus Edwards because I do believe his upside is higher. If we come into the week and Alexander Mattison plays, like I said earlier, I said it throughout this chat, I do believe that there is reason to be worried about what his upside is with Alexander Mattison. Do the Vikings all of a sudden go, we've got both guys back, let's distribute some wealth? I don't think they should do that. I think if you're logical as a coach, you wouldn't do that. You would not do that. So I would definitely play Ty Chandler over him because of what we saw last week from Ty Chandler versus Gus Edwards, where I know what I'm getting from him. At best, we're getting a 2-touchdown game, but that is very rare and probably not super likely against the 49ers this week. So I would go with Ty Chandler this week, and I would personally hold on to Austin Eckler because I do still think that it's a little bit premature to just go ahead and drop him. I get it. I get the frustration. In a lot of ways, he's going to be on my bench a lot this week. But I do think he's worth holding on to for the time being. And again, Cindy, appreciate your super chat. Ham, what's going on? Good to see you in here tonight. By far my hardest week for decision-making. Start 2. 2 wide receivers, 2 running backs, and a flex and a tight end. JT, Chandler, Kupp, Smith, McBride, Aaron Jones, ETN, Connor Reed, Monty, Zeke, and Waller. Thanks a bunch. Well, thank you for being here. So I'll start this out with going with the running backs here. So Jonathan Taylor, if you have not heard, is likely, I wouldn't say likely, I haven't read likely, but it is looking like he is possibly going to make his return this week. And he's taking on the Falcons. First of all, the matchup is very good. I could see a world where Jonathan Taylor has a good game. But here's the problem that I have with Jonathan Taylor right now. And I actually said this before when Jonathan Taylor got hurt and we knew he was going to miss some time. I said this about Jonathan Taylor, which is that, listen, at best case scenario, he comes back week 16. And what could possibly happen is that this guy comes in and he just doesn't have the upside that he did, because look at what just happened with Zach Moss. When he took back over for Jonathan Taylor, he's been a bust up until last week when he got a touchdown, and then he got injured right after that. So it's like Zach Moss didn't come in after his long absence on the bench when Jonathan Taylor came back and immediately pick up right back where he left off. So it's not healthy, I don't think, to assume that Jonathan Taylor will just come back and do that. Now, granted, Jonathan Taylor is a much better player than Zach Moss. Most of us understand this, that Jonathan Taylor is a much more talented player. Not denying that. And in your situation here, it's like when I've got guys like, Aaron Jones, who is just as risky, probably riskier. I would play him over Aaron Jones. Now, Travis Etienne, it's really close. He's actually what you'll see tomorrow in the same tier as Jonathan Taylor. I would still take Etienne over Jonathan Taylor. So what it comes down to is, what am I doing? JT, Chandler, or Aaron Jones? I'll go with JT because I do think his upside is high against the Falcons. So I would go with Etienne and JT as the starting running backs here. The two wide receivers, I definitely got to go with Cooper Kupp, and I've got to go with Devonta Smith, because I just think that I'm assuming Devonta Smith is one of the options. Devonta Smith, I do think, is just, like I said earlier in the chat, I think his floor is very safe. I think his upside is also very high as well. So when I see a guy like Jaden Reed, who I love, for those of you who have been with my channel for months, I love Jaden Reed. The big Jaden Reed guy. Here's the problem with Jaden Reed. The past several weeks without Christian Watson, absolutely fantastic. Now, first of all, he's been dealing with an injury for a good month now at this point. He's been dealing with that chest injury that has kind of limited him in practice for a good month. Now he's got that toe injury on top of it. He did not practice today, along with Christian Watson. So while he may very well play, he's definitely starting to break down a little bit. And it's fine because he's a rookie and he's had a great season. I don't trust him as much as I trust Devonta Smith and Cooper Kupp. Now, when you've got Dave Montgomery as your other option, there's no way I'm sitting him. So I would go with Dave Montgomery as the flex option right here, because I just think his upside's too high. Even when you take the last 2 weeks, which have not been great games from Montgomery, they also haven't been bad games. They're not crushing you. And by the way, he's still handling the majority of the work. So the workload and the approach is still the same when it comes to David Montgomery. Nothing changes there. The problem is past 2 weeks hasn't gotten in the end zone. Very rare, by the way. Very, very rare. I think he gets back in the end zone this week. I mean, it's so easy to predict for me, for the most part, that the Lions running backs, at least one of them gets in the end zone. Something has to go horrifically wrong for it to not happen. Just so happens that Jahmyr Gibbs has been the guy the past couple weeks. So I think Montgomery has to be in the lineup here. And then when I'm looking at McBride versus Waller, first of all, Waller didn't do much last week. I think Waller is just on a terrible offense that week to week, you don't know what you're going to get. At best, they're going to do what they did against the Packers, which was good, but it wasn't exactly like the pass catchers had all of a sudden just tremendous upside, right? And at worst, you're going to see what they did last week. Now, on the other hand, Trey McBride, like I said, this dude is just too important right now. Just simply too important to this team for me to say, no, yeah, bench him. Like, that just is not happening. The wide receivers have not been producing. Trey McBride is the number one target for Kyler Murray, and he's been great, regardless of matchup. So I would play Trey McBride at the tight end position here. So I would go with ETN, Jonathan Taylor at running back. I would go with Devonta Smith, Cooper Kupp at wide receiver, Monty at flex, and Trey McBride at the tight end position. And again, appreciate the super chat, Ham. Shy Colin, what's going on? Start one, Swift, Chandler, or Connor at running back 2. This is a great question. For those of you who are on Patreon with me, you were able to see my top 50 running back rankings on Patreon a couple hours ago. 2 guys dropped a big amount. Austin Eckler, DeAndre Swift. I've got very little confidence in Swift right now as well. This week, I have slight levels of confidence with him just because they're playing the Giants, though. Slight levels of confidence with him. It's hard to have a lot of confidence in Connor because he's playing the Bears. The Bears are tough. I mean, they just held the Browns to I think 30 yards on the ground last week. I mean, the Bears are for real defensively right now. Montez Sweat changed this defense. So I don't really love the matchup. But again, I didn't love it last week for Connor either, and he still came through. So I think that it's definitely going to be one of those situations where it's like, okay, he's got more upside than I think. And it's always been the case with James Conner. I don't know what it is. I've just never been a big James Conner guy, but he always proves me wrong. Ty Chandler, like I said, very, very close. Like all 3 of these guys, literally, I can't even tell you. You're going to be shocked how close they are in tomorrow's running back rankings video. You're going to be shocked because they're all very close. I would go with James Conner because I think that James Conner, at least what he has over Swift, is a full workload to count on. We can lean on a full workload from James Conner. We can't lean on that from Swift. Swift came back against the Seahawks this past week, had more upside because he had more work, but it still wasn't a bunch. So I do think that James Conner, just based on volume alone, is the best option here. Ty Chandler, watch out though, because what I will say, and I think I should have said this off the top, for every Ty Chandler question I've answered tonight, please know this. If Alexander Mattison misses again, Ty Chandler shoots above Swift and James Conner pretty easily. He moves up several spots. It relies on Alexander Mattison's presence because, like I said, I'm worried about what the distribution is going to be. So watch out for it. If Mattison does not play, I would play Chandler. But if he does play, I'll go with Conner. And again, appreciate the super chat. Elijah Rudin, what's going on? Javonte Williams or Garrett Wilson? Standard. Much love. Appreciate you being here tonight. Yeah, I think when I caught flack last week for leaving Garrett Wilson out of my top 30 wide receiver video, I said I kind of kept quiet on it because, Garrett Wilson is the same thing every week. It's very similar to like Amari Cooper, right? Like where it's like Garrett Wilson is always capable of a big game. Like if he had a quarterback, he's capable. He's so capable. It's the biggest disappointment. He's the best wide receiver out of that 2022 draft class. He's better than Drake London. He's better than Chris Olave. He's better than Jameson Williams. He's better than all of them, right? So it's like there's so much there with him that it's so frustrating. And I hate talking about Garrett Wilson because it frustrates me. It really does. I want to see good players succeed in this league, and he can't with Zach Wilson or whoever the hell clown show they throw out there at quarterback, right? Like, it's like a jack in the box. It's like playing with a jack in the box every week. That's how I feel about Garrett Wilson because he's always capable of you wind up the jack in the box, right? Nothing happens. You're sitting there. You're like, all right, when's this thing coming out? And you're like, oh, I appreciate that he didn't come out this time. You know what I mean? It's like, I appreciate the fact that he didn't come out and blow up in my face. And that's akin to Garrett Wilson getting you a 20-point game because you felt so nervous to play him. But then other times you're rolling that jack in the box, you're just like, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And then it pops out at you, and you're just like, yep, there it is. A 3-point week, a 5-point week from Garrett Wilson. That's what he can do. That's what it's like. It's like playing with a jack in the box. I just watched Elf. That's probably why I'm feeling like that right now. But I love Garrett Wilson. Like, obviously. Javonte Williams, I don't think he's got much upside. Like, against the Patriots, I acknowledge that the matchup's better. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire just had a good week against the Patriots. I think that there's more potential upside with Garrett Wilson, to be honest with you. Javonte Williams, from a workload perspective, really steady. But you know what? This guy just he has not been efficient all year. I don't think that it's like, what's interesting is that for running backs who experienced the injuries, like it used to be a thing where it was like, you would want to avoid a running back in fantasy football the first year off a knee injury. Like several years ago, it was like that, and over the years, like these ACL injuries are like quicker recovery times, and you see the players come back just as explosive. I actually think that Javonte Williams is definitely showing signs of struggling to recover. Like he's tough. He's a physical player. He's never been a massive explosion guy, but he just doesn't look very explosive. So I think that, if my back's up against the wall, I think that personally I would go with the jack in the box here. I would go with Garrett Wilson because I know that he could pop off, get you a 25-point week if things go right. And again, upside is what we play for in fantasy football. So I appreciate the super chat. RJ Bacani, what's going on, my man? Achane, Monty, Noah Brown, or OBJ in the flex? Great question, because I think that all these guys are upside plays. I actually think they're all upside plays. Now, they all have different floors, for sure. Like, if I'm looking at Noah Brown this week, obviously what he did last week is on my mind. Without CJ Stroud, without Nico Collins, was a baller last week. So what's to say he doesn't do it again, as it looks like CJ Stroud doesn't play and Nico Collins may not play, right? Like, what's to say he doesn't again? The Browns this week does scare me more than the Bears do, because the Bears' weakness on defense is actually their secondary. Their front seven, they're stopping the run. They're getting after your quarterback. They're creating turnovers. But, from a coverage perspective, it's not like they're a lockdown defense there. So I'm worried more about the Browns matchup for Noah Brown. OBJ last week is the perfect example of what he is. A player that when everything is right for him, and this is like, I don't dislike Odell Beckham Jr. When I say this, like, don't take it as like me disliking the player. Whenever I talk about players, there's nothing personal. I just want y'all to know that. But like, when I think about Odell Beckham, it's like, this is a player I used to really, really like when he was very at LSU. I liked him. And then when he came into the league, it was like, this guy's so electric. He's such an elite athlete. But his problem has always been, like, things need to go his way, or else he becomes disinterested. I think last week you saw that against the Jaguars on Sunday night. Like, he just was irrelevant for the most part, and it was like the targets he did get, he either dropped, and he did drop passes last week, or they were underthrown. So it was like, he gets frustrated, and it's like, whatever. So I think that, Odell Beckham is definitely a very risky play, as is Noah Brown. With Achane and Monty, I would say Achane's still risky. I don't think it's as risky, though, because the way I look at Achane, as I said earlier, is that this player easily could pop off and give you a 30-point week this week. And I couldn't stand to see him on your bench. Now, the way I feel about Dave Montgomery is that, like I said just a couple minutes ago, it's a guy that I definitely see the upside with because of the fact that he gets a super consistent workload and because Detroit's excellent on the ground. One of the best offensive lines in football, if not the very best, honestly. So Dave Montgomery, it's between him and Achane. It's really tough to bench Achane, but again, when it gets this close for me, I have to split hairs. And the way I think about this one is that James when I think about it, David Montgomery is just in a better situation this week versus the Vikings. I know I can lean on his workload. And the matchup for Achane versus the Cowboys, it's like if he doesn't pop off for a big run, like what are his numbers going to be? They're not going to be very good probably because the Cowboys are going to come in pissed in this game. Their defense was embarrassed. And that's a tough defense, man. Like I like their chance of rebounding. So I have worries here with Achane, but not as many as I have with Noah Brown and OBJ. And I don't have as many with Montgomery as the rest of those guys. So I think that Montgomery's upside is still really high. So I would go with Montgomery over Achane, Noah Brown, and Odell Beckham Jr. And again, appreciate the super chat. Filthy Swift 49, what's going on? Bijan Robinson, I'm assuming that's what it is, or possibly Brian Robinson. Let me know. Achane, Jacobs, Breece Hall, Montgomery's 2-start, and any of those over Metcalf or flex. Yeah, so I think that, obviously I got to go with Montgomery, like I said, because Montgomery, again, you'll see tomorrow, running back rankings video, tomorrow on Thursday, and kicker rankings video. So stay tuned for those videos. I think that really what it also comes down to here is that Achane is not far behind him. Achane is going to be in my RB2 slot. So it really comes down to, look, if you're talking about Bijan Robinson, like I know that most of us are going to want to sit him this week based on, it's really hard. Like what's really hard is when you get to the fantasy football playoffs and there's been a player on your team who's been disappointing you kind of relatively consistently, but still has upside for massive plays. And it's like, that's what Bijan Robinson's season has been. I mean, most of us drafted him in the first round. At the very least, you got him in the second round, and you were lucky at the time. If we redrafted today, he wouldn't be in the top 12 picks if you're in a 12-team league. Bijan Robinson, I still do have him this particular week as a top 10 start. Again, you'll see the video tomorrow. I can look past that performance from Bijan Robinson. I personally can. So, over Metcalf this week, I think that Metcalf, like I said, there's things that I think could go his way this week against the Titans. I don't trust their quarterback situation very much, though. I think that the matchup is great, but it's been dicey with Drew Lock, and who knows what happens with Geno Smith. If he comes back, he was active in the game on Monday night, but he didn't start. Kind of a weird thing to do, but we've seen that before. So when it comes down to it for me, it's like, do I want Bijan Robinson's upside or Metcalf's upside? Because the floor for Bijan is what we saw last week. And in fact, I think that was an aberration. I don't think we're going to see many more games like that. But I don't like their coach. And he's been the primary problem for Bijan this year. It's close. It really is close. Metcalf versus the Titans. The matchup is great. Bijan versus the Colts matchup is not bad. Very, very tough call, but I'm going to have to go with Bijan here. Like I said, I'm willing to move past this one. I'm willing to move past the week. I think that he still has ridiculous upside. I mean, there's tons of upside there. It's all about playing Russian roulette with Arthur Smith if you want to do that. But, I mean, it's not like Metcalf is some locked and loaded 15 to 20-point game either. Metcalf could easily struggle this week and be less involved. So I could be really wrong on this one. And in fact, I really wouldn't be surprised. I mean, this one, I may be wrong on Metcalf this week. But for me personally, I'm going with Bijan Robinson if that's the guy you're referring to. And again, I appreciate the super chat, Mr. Filthy Swift. Or Mrs. Demetrios, what's going on, my man? Patron member here. Appreciate the super chat. Evan Ingram or Goddard, non-PPR. Thanks, Ryan. So yeah, it definitely is going to be Ingram. Like I think Ingram, like what we've clearly seen with Ingram is that the moment that Christian Kirk went down, Evan Ingram's importance in this offense was always there, always there. But his upside became higher because he became more used in the red zone. So Ingram to me is just a better play right now than Goddard. I don't think that Goddard's a bad play. Like I said, if you were here earlier in the chat when I was discussing with somebody kind of where my line is with Dallas Goedert, I would play Evan Ingram over him. I would play McBride. I would play Laporta. I would play Kelsey. I'd play Hawkinson. The line for me really is kind of at like Jake Ferguson. That's the line. And I put Ingram over that line because Ingram has just been super important. Last week was last week. The Ravens are a tough matchup. Against the Bucs this week, give me Evan Ingram without not only Christian Kirk, also without Zay Jones this week as well. They're going to be desperate, trying to get their ball into the player's hand they can trust the most. And I think it's Evan Ingram, not Calvin Ridley. Again, appreciate the super chat. Appreciate you being in here. So I'm going to answer 2 more questions, guys. I'm going to cap it off at 2 more, and then I'm going to go ahead and sign off for the night. So please like the video and subscribe to the channel to show your support if you've gotten value from this so far. Isaiah Gomera, I really want to talk about this one. I'm glad I got back to it. So this is a chat way up here at the beginning of the chat. If Tyreek and Pittman miss this week, which 2 do I start? Pick up off waivers. JSN, Palmer, Shaheed, Boyd, or Samuel. Okay, so I'll address what 2 to pick up first, and then I want to discuss Pittman. I really do. The 2 guys that I would personally pick up here are going to be Jackson Smith-Njigba and Josh Palmer. I think that Palmer provides a pretty good ceiling, especially if Keenan Allen is still out. And I don't think that it's unlikely that Keenan Allen gets shut down. And let me see what the update is on him today. Keenan Allen likely to miss another week. So yeah, I would pick up Josh Palmer, play him. And then I would pick up Jackson Smith-Njigba because like when I look at the rest of these guys, like Shaheed, low target guy, banking on a touchdown. Boyd, without Jamar Chase for sure, but you know what he did without T? Very little. Curtis Samuel, it's like on a weekly basis, like I do think that Curtis Samuel's upside is there. I just can't ever really trust it, to be honest with you. So I do think that Jackson Smith-Njigba, a player who's consistently involved, can get in the end zone because he's a great player. So I'd go with Jackson Smith-Njigba. Let me address the Michael Pittman injury really quick, though. And I usually don't, like I said, I usually don't talk about like the merit behind these suspensions. I just kind of find it important to the game because I love this game so much. I kind of was talking about in my wide receiver rankings video yesterday about how I kind of mentioned, I was like, you know, Damontae KZ, the safety who got suspended for the full season because of the hit he put on Michael Pittman. I was like, whether that's right or wrong, that's not for me to say. And I saw someone in the comments say, you know, that was attempted murder. First of all, before I go into this one, I just want everyone to know, like, everyone can always feel free to chime in on my videos. Like, and I always try to respond back to as many people as I can. The channel has grown a significant amount this season. Started out, like, in July, I had, like, 2,500 subscribers. Now we're closing in on 10,000. So it's like, I love the community. I love connecting with you guys. I try to respond to as many as I can. And everyone always want to feel free for y'all to put your input in. But what I want to say about this one is this. I couldn't disagree more with the suspension they handed down on Damontae KZ. Do you know why guys like Bill Belichick, Sean Payton, John Gruden, maybe not the best example, but do you know why those guys hate Roger Goodell and the front office in the NFL? It's because those guys didn't play football. They have no idea how hard it is to play football. And I actually talk about this pretty often on my channel. The rule changes in football have totally slanted towards the offensive players, right? Like it's totally slanted in favor of wide receivers and quarterbacks in particular. Now, I am not saying that like some of the rule changes, shouldn't have been implemented. Like I get it. There's a lot of times where you're going to see like when they got sued for CTE. It's like they don't want that to happen again. They settled for big money in that situation. They don't want to have that happen again, right? So they're trying to do everything they can to not get sued again. I understand that. But the reason that those guys, true football meatheads, hate Roger Goodell in that front office is because they have no idea how hard it is to play football. Like I said, I grew up in the days of watching Ray Lewis, Troy Polamalu, Ryan Clark, John Lynch, Bob Sanders, Dion, Dawkins. I mean, there's so many guys I could list off that used to just light dudes up over the middle of the field. They've taken that out of the game, right? And Tom Brady actually made a comment on this one as well. And it's a very good point. And it's a little hypocritical if you ask me, but it is a very good point. The point that he brought up was, when does the quarterback get blamed in that kind of situation? So it's a really funny term that kind of football meatheads use, which is that, there's certain quarterbacks that throw hospital balls. And what that essentially means is a quarterback throws such a horrific pass that puts his wide receiver in brutal danger of getting his head knocked off. And you hear quarterbacks from different eras back in the day talk about this. Talk about, I had to be super careful of where I put the ball because I knew if I didn't put it exactly where it needed to be, I could put the wide receiver in position to get really hurt. Troy Aikman talks about that. Brady talks about that. Peyton talked about that. Like some of the legends at the position. So my point about all this is that when you are in that situation where you watch that play, Gardner Minshew throws a horrendous football. Michael Pittman has to lay out for it last second. Now, if you watch the replay back, the safety, DeMonte KZ, is coming in, lowering his shoulder to get Pittman in the chest area. Because you know what happens? He knows I'm going to get penalized if I go high on this guy. If he stands straight up and if I aim for his head, I'm getting penalized and tossed out of the game. If I go for his legs, he's going to get a torn ACL, be done for the season. So when a player has already launched into his launch point, okay, he's launched, there's no changing that. So the only thing that changes is when Pittman has to dive for the ball to go get it. And now all of a sudden he's in the target zone, right? So I really push back on this notion that this was a dirty play from KZ. And it is not, for those of you who have been with my channel, I'm a Steelers fan. I'm not hiding behind that. I would defend this hit if it was a Colts player doing it to one of our guys. I would defend this hit if it was a Ravens player. I don't care who the team is because I love the game of football, and I don't want to see things like that and the hip drop tackle be placed so much in the decision-making process of what these defensive players are going to do. Because eventually what leads down the line is a lot of these defenders are like, I can't do anything. And it's no defense, and that makes football less enjoyable as a consumer. It's a very slippery slope because if you really watch that play, KZ launched before Pittman was even diving. He was not trying to injure him. He was going for this guy's chest, and he just so happened to be in that launch zone because Gardner Minshew threw an awful pass. Awful. So I just wanted to kind of talk about that because, obviously, I want to answer the fantasy question, but I love this game. I love the game of football, and I don't want to see it turn into flag football because the more and more they try to outlaw certain hits, certain tackles, that's the direction we're heading. And can you tell me that as a consumer, you can watch flag football? Because that's what the Pro Bowl is. Look at the ratings for the Pro Bowl. They get no viewers because nobody wants to see flag football. We have to live with uncomfortable hits sometimes. That's the way I view football. If you agree with me, if you don't agree with me, that's totally fine. We can have different opinions. But I am a football meathead junkie to my core in my veins. And I will stand up for a hit like that personally. So I just wanted to say that really quick. Eber De La Hoya, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Lost Herbert, Dell, Kirk, Andrews, and Mitchell. That's a brutal situation. Need 2 flex from Zay Flowers, McKinnon, Warren, Deontay Johnson, and Noah Brown. Also, which tight end? Otten, Kraft, Taysom. Thank you. So, okay, 2 flex out of these guys. Zay Flowers is going to be one of them. And I get it. Zay Flowers was bad last week. And this is really the problem that I've had with Zay all year is that he has showed lately a couple upside games. But Zay Flowers definitely is not, he's not set in stone every week because the problem that he has is that unless he gets peppered with 8 targets, the chances that he gets a lot of production are not as high because of the fact that this guy plays a lot at the line of scrimmage. That's where Lamar Jackson's throwing in the ball. So I just do think it's important to note that, although I do think that the opportunity is great this week in an upside matchup where they're going to have to put up points. So I'm going to go with Zay as one of those guys. It's tough because, I would say this. If Isaiah Pacheco did not play, again, which he is, by the way, expected to play, Jerick McKinnon would probably be the play, but Isaiah Pacheco is expected to play this week. Important to note. So I'm going to go ahead and go with Noah Brown because I can't trust either Steelers option for upside. Neither of them have upside. They just don't. So Noah Brown is the guy I'm going to go with here as the second flex because I do think that without Nico Collins again, let me see. Let's get an update on Nico Collins here. I kind of have a feeling he's not going to play. Limited in practice this week. So possibly. It's up in the air. We'll see what happens. If Nico Collins does play, I will have to shift to Deontay Johnson because I think that Deontay, as low upside as I think he is, I do think he has a pretty stable floor. But make no mistake, if Nico doesn't go, I'm playing Noah Brown. And then which tight end? Kraft, Otten, or Taysom? It's really interesting because if you asked me this last week, I would go with Taysom Hill. I thought that Taysom Hill was a smash play without Olave. He was abysmal. And really, that's always been the problem with Taysom Hill, and one that, it's so hard to accept sometimes when things look like they're lining up, because Taysom Hill's problem is that he always is inconsistent with the workload. We can't count on it. So that's my problem with Taysom Hill. And honestly, Tucker Kraft is a guy that, again, scouted him very closely in the 2023 Dynasty Rookie Draft Guide last season, or earlier in this offseason. I like the player, and he's starting to emerge in this offense as a go-to guy for Jordan Love. And I would take him over Otten because I just think that Otten, yes, has a touchdown upside attached to him, but week to week, his volume changes. So I'm going to go with Kraft here because I think that he's emerging. He is also a rookie tight end. And so now that he is kind of getting established in this offense, I think he's finding his groove a little bit. So I would go with Kraft at tight end, Zay, and Noah Brown at wide receiver. And again, appreciate the super chat. Eber De La Hoya. Elijah Rudin, what's going on? Stafford or Love and Colts defense or Jets defense? Hoping the Jack in the Box has a good game. Yeah. So obviously, for those of y'all who weren't here for that, Jack in the Box is what I made up for Garrett Wilson because that's how I feel. Like I'm playing with a Jack in the Box, winding that thing up. He either hits, which is the equivalent of the Jackson Box not coming out, or he busts and the Jack in the Box pops out and screams at you and laughs at you. That's how I feel playing Garrett Wilson. Stafford or Love, Jordan Love is really struggling without Christian Watson. That's the main problem I have with him is that his upside without Watson, I do think is lower. Like what we're seeing is that like they don't really have a big play threat. I love Jaden Reed, great player. And I think that he is a big play threat, but I don't think he's really gotten as much opportunity to go deep because they like to use him closer to the line of scrimmage. So, and especially with the possibility that Jaden Reed doesn't play this week, you've got Romeo Doubs, Dontavian Wicks as your two guys. That's a problem. So I think that Jordan Love is actually in a worse spot than a lot of people may think. Stafford or Love, I would go with Stafford because I think that you've got Stafford's weapons firing in all cylinders right now. Not just Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. Kyron Williams is absolutely ripping defenses to shreds. Can't bench those options, and I would go with the defense I think has the most upside, I would go with the quarterback I think has the most upside based on weapons, which I think is Stafford. Colts or Jets defense, definitely going to be the Colts. If you watch my Week 16 defense rankings, the Colts were way higher than the Jets. We'll leave it at that. If you haven't seen the video, go back and watch it. But definitely love the Colts every week because, and I kind of spotted this early in the season, they had a great schedule. Like, and it's coming to fruition that they're an elite fantasy defense. Against the Falcons this week, who sputtered and lost the game to the Panthers. How disgusting. The amount of weapons they have. I'm so disgusted with Arthur Smith. I'm not even a Falcons fan. I'm just disgusted. Definitely going to go with the Colts defense. The Jets, I do think that, listen, the Washington Commanders, I just want to address this because I've been getting a lot of Jets questions. And like I said, I try to answer as many people as I can in the comments on my videos. But the more this channel has grown, it gets tougher for me to answer everybody. So I want to address anyone who's ever asked a Jets question this week. What I think about the Jets defense this week is you look at the Commanders, the matchup is not exactly horrific, right? Because even if Commanders put up 27 points, which they can do, they're going to come along with probably a couple turnovers. Here's the problem. The Jets are in just as much of a tailspin as the Commanders. The Jets are in a tailspin. First of all, they were knocked out of playoff hope, so they have no more playoff hope, and there's no more chance of Aaron Rodgers coming back. This team they're not in a good spot right now. There's a lot of finger pointing on this team right now. It's similar to watching the Steelers. It's not good. So I don't just think that the Jets are some locked and loaded defense this week. Not that the Colts necessarily are. I feel very much more confident about the Colts, though. So I'd go with the Colts. Colts defense, Stafford are my plays. And again, appreciate the super chat. Grassy FPS, what's going on, my man? Fellow patron member over here. Appreciate you being here tonight. Flex. Parker Washington, Tyjae Spears, Chandler Elliott, or Jameson Williams. I'm just assuming, actually. I kind of need a little bit more clarification on that one because that could either be Javonte Williams or Jameson Williams. And can you add Noah Brown to the flex options as well? Of course, yeah. So Noah Brown definitely changes the game here because, like, Zeke for me is a very uncomfortable play. Against the Broncos defense, I really don't think it's a good idea. I think it could blow up in people's faces much like it just did against the Chiefs. So I don't have a lot of confidence when it comes to Zeke this week. Parker Washington, I continue to say this week that he's a very low-key good play. Against the Buccaneers defense, no Zay Jones, no Christian Kirk. This offense is Evan Ingram, Calvin Ridley, and Parker Washington. And Calvin Ridley has done very little with 25-plus targets. They could very easily make a shift offensively as far as their scheme goes and what they try to do. Parker, I would take him over Tyjae this week. I would play him over Zeke this week. Like I said, if it's Javonte, I would play Javonte over Parker Washington, but if it's Jameson Williams, I'd play Parker Washington over Jameson. But Noah Brown, obviously, like I said, he comes in and changes the thing up. Because Ty Chandler, I would play over Parker Washington. if Zeke is not there, it is JMO. Okay, so JMO, he's not going to be the guy. So thank you for clarifying that. Ty Chandler, I would play him over Washington only if Alexander Madison doesn't play. If he does play, I'd probably go with Parker Washington. But if Noah Brown is without Nico Collins, I play him over everybody. If Nico Collins doesn't play, I go Noah Brown. If Ty Chandler is alone in the backfield, I take Ty Chandler over Noah Brown. So it really goes in order. Ty Chandler, Noah Brown, Parker Washington. That's the order it goes in. So, Ty Chandler over Parker Washington. I know I said a minute ago I'd play Parker over Ty Chandler, but I wouldn't. I would play Ty Chandler. So in order, Chandler, Noah Brown, Parker Washington. Only if Ty Chandler doesn't have Alexander Madison. If he has Madison, he falls underneath Noah Brown. Noah Brown, if he doesn't have Nico, falls under Parker Washington. So it really comes down to Ty Chandler and Noah Brown here. And the guy I prefer, if everyone is healthy, or if everyone's healthy and those circumstances come to light, it's Ty Chandler. It's Ty Chandler, the guy I'm picking right here. And again, appreciate your super chat. Hope you saw the top 50 running back rankings on Patreon, guys. And by the way, if you're interested in Patreon, I know you'll get a lot of value out of it if you're already interested. If you're not interested, no big deal. I'm just going to pop the link in the comments right here, just in case you want to take a look at those cheers. I made it cheaper than the lunch you buy. $4 per month for tier 1, $8 per month for tier 2. So check it out if you're interested. You can see all the benefits and the content that is in each single tier. Brian Ruiz, what's going on? Broncos or Colts defense this week? I'm assuming this week. And if it's this week, they're both very close. I mean, obviously, if you watch my rankings this week, they're both extremely close. Because I just think that, the Colts defense against the Falcons doesn't scare me at all. All the weapons they've got show for nothing last week. They can play big, but they also play extremely small and stupid because their coach, I just don't think it's very good. So I love the Colts defense every week. The Broncos defense, I've got a lot of confidence in this week, though. The Patriots are just not very good. And it's in Denver. It's a team that's fighting for a playoff spot. I got to go with Denver. Denver, I really do think they're gonna put a hurt on the Patriots this week. Denver is not extremely talented either on offense, but their defense, they've caught fire. They played the Lions last week, got their butts kicked. My guess is they come back against the Patriots, play very well. I'll go with the Broncos defense. And again, appreciate the super chat. Draco, what's going on? Browns or Jets defense special teams? Tight end Kincaid, Goddard, or Hunter Henry? So Browns defense for sure. Like I said, I don't like the. If you're in Patreon, you see the top 32 defense rankings every week. And you see where the Jets are. And it's like, it's not that I don't think they're a good defense, but I've got no confidence in them right now. I think they're just as much in the tailspin as the Commanders. I don't think they have some leg up on the Commanders. I really don't. So the Browns defense without CJ Stroud looking like this week, I'll play the Browns defense. And then Kincaid, Goddard, or Henry, it's really close. Like Kincaid, I wouldn't personally play because Dawson Knox, my theory about Dawson Knox has turned out to be right. $50 million guy they signed in the offseason, not going to just ride the bench when he plays. That's what we've seen with him being back. So Kincaid, unfortunately, is not the guy. I would like him to be, but he's not. And then Goddard or Henry, it's so funny because it's like Hunter Henry started out the year so hot, and then he completely just fizzled out to not rosterable. And now all of a sudden, it's like, can I play him again? I picked him up off the waiver wire. Can I play him? And it's like, I think you can play him in a lot of situations. This is where I would say Goddard, though, personally, because it's like you are relying on a touchdown from Hunter Henry. Against the Broncos, I don't love that opportunity. Whereas the Eagles against the Giants this week, I've said it in the week, I think it's a get-right game for them. So I would go with Goddard personally because I think that this is a get-right game for them. I like the upside opportunity more than I like it for Hunter Henry. And again, appreciate the super chat. Grassy FPS, what's going on? Why the Bears over Broncos? And number two, thoughts on Justice Hill, I'm assuming. So first part of the question is Bears over Broncos. So my mentality on Bears over Broncos really comes down to more intangible things than it is numbers. So like numbers you can see when you watch my defense ranking video is that the Bears defense, what you're seeing from them season long is not indicative of what they've been doing the past 4 weeks. With Montez Sweat, they're averaging about 3 to 4 sacks per game. They're averaging over a turnover per game, closer to 2. They're coming off 3 straight dominant defensive performances. By the way, against the Browns offense last week, that is much better with Flacco. But they're forcing turnovers. This is a defense that's looking similar to the Colts in a little bit. Because the Colts defense, they can get after your quarterback and they create turnovers. So the Bears defense is really disruptive. Now with the Cardinals, obviously they can put up points. They've got Kyler Murray, who's making things happen right now. And he's got McBride and he's got James Conner playing well. I'm not saying that the Cardinals are a better matchup than, the Patriots offense, right? Like that's not what I'm saying. But my point here is that I've said this about Kyler and the Cardinals over the season. And what my point on it is that when I think about Kyler and this matchup with the Cardinals, I think about all the weeks that I said to myself, I think the Cardinals are really trying to draft another quarterback. I don't think Kyler, they want to be their guy. You just think about it. This is a totally new front office than when Kyler got drafted. Cliff Kingsbury, he's gone. That GM, he's gone. So all the guys who liked him, they're out of the building. And by the way, those guys who liked him and drafted him in the first place, they didn't like him at the end. So Kyler Murray, these new guys come in. He doesn't have a great reputation already. The teammates don't exactly love the guy. So it's like we could just come in here, tank the season, and draft Caleb Williams or Drake May, right? I think they're trying to do that. I mean, I think a lot of things are stacked up against Kyler. And when you've got the Bears defense playing like they've been over the past several weeks, I like the momentum against a team that has the opposite momentum. Whereas the Broncos just got their butts kicked last week versus the Lions. So maybe there's a little bit of, in their own heads a little bit, right? That's possible. So that's the reasoning behind the Bears over the Broncos. Now, the other part of this, thoughts on Justice Hill. My thoughts on Justice Hill is that, I think that Justice Hill is a player that will have value moving forward. Like the final couple weeks in the fantasy season, he's going to have value. But what I will also say is that it's only out of necessity. Think back to earlier in the year. The first guy who got hurt, the running back one originally, J.K. Dobbins, right? So when J.K. Dobbins goes down, Justice Hill, Gus Edwards, they're the two guys. Well, over that time, Gus Edwards and, Justice Hill mostly was getting phased out due to Keaton Mitchell's emergence, right? So 2 times this year, they phased him out of the offense because they just don't want him to be the guy. Now, out of necessity, pure necessity, is he in the spot he's in now, which is the running back 2. So, yes, I think he has upside, but I don't think that it's anywhere sniffing the top 24. So I wouldn't say he's a startable guy. I think the only upside he really has in fantasy is when he's able to get in the end zone. So that's what I'll say about Justice Hill. Again, appreciate your super chat. Jordan8821, what's going on? Running back pick 2. Saquon, Bijan, Gibbs, Jacobs, and Achane. So definitely got to go with Gibbs and Achane here. It's really not much of a thought. even though like I like all these options on the surface level, Saquon to me, it's the same every week. Like Saquon doesn't drop in my rankings just because of what he did last week. It doesn't change my outlook on him. My outlook on Saquon, very consistent. This guy is boom or bust because he's the whole offense. If he doesn't go, that offense doesn't go. Everything lies on him. So against the bad defense versus Green Bay, he's able to do that and have a great game. Against the way tougher defense versus New Orleans, he gets stifled because they know who to key in on. So that's the problem with Saquon. And against the Eagles this week, as bad as they've been defensively, I think that they can definitely identify this because they play in division. Sell out to stop Saquon, you stop the Giants. With Bijan, I need, lack of confidence for sure. Upside high, I'll take Gibbs' upside because I think his floor is higher than Bijan Robinson's. Jacobs coming back off the injury versus the Chiefs. Not exactly a great matchup, not a bad one. Jacobs not been as efficient as Gibbs, and I don't think has the upside that Achane does. So I'm going with Gibbs, and I'm going with Achane. Thank you. Appreciate the super chat. Eric, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat, man. I've got T. Higgins, Sutton, Puka Nacua, Chuba Hubbard. Need one wide receiver and one wide receiver running back flex. I'm counting on Pacheco and Jacobs playing for me. Also, Baker Moneymaker or Love at quarterback. I like that one. So you need one wide receiver and one flex. So you're looking at Puka Nacua here is the guy that like you got to go with Puka as your wide receiver. Like I like Sutton. Weekly, I think that Sutton and I we've rebuilt our relationship. For the select few of you who were with me last season when I still had like 1,000 subscribers, I was so big on Sutton last year and he completely douched all over me. So I came in very sour on Sutton. We've rebuilt our relationship because I understand what he does. He's their number one for sure, Russ's favorite, and he also is getting a lot of red zone work. And he's a big play threat now for them. So Sutton, I feel really good to say that his ceiling is actually somewhere in the 20 to 25 range right now, but his floor still relatively low because he's not going to get you 8 to 10 receptions for 100 yards. That's not his game. So I don't see the upside there with Puka, with Sutton like I do with Puka. Now the other guy, T. Higgins, without Jamar Chase, all signs and all the numbers and all on paper shows that T. Higgins should be in line for a good performance. T. Higgins over the years without Jamar Chase has not done as good as you think. And I think I know the reason. I don't think T. Higgins is a true number one. I don't. This season has shown me a lot. I mean, obviously last week was great, but he only had 4 catches and he dropped some passes too. So he's great at the big plays. And I'm not saying he can't get it this week, especially against the Steelers. He could definitely do it. For me, he's the guy that I would flex because Chuba Hubbard, I can't count on him. Even against the Packers, where I do think the matchup is good, I can't count on him. So I got to go with Sutton, or I got to go with T over Sutton at the flex spot. Hopefully Pacheco and Jacobs play for you. I think they're both supposed to, so you should be good there. And then Baker or Love at quarterback. It's so funny. Like the thought of picking Baker Mayfield as my starting quarterback in fantasy used to be it used to be a laughing stock. But this guy has been very good in fantasy. Like I really actually should mention him and what I got right and what I got wrong. I never give Baker Mayfield the time of day. He deserves it. He really does. Against the Jaguars, I think that the matchup does look like it's setting up to be great. I mean, the Jaguars matchup is fantastic. I do think that there is a chance that Jordan Love is a very, very big disappointment this week because of the fact that looks like he's going to be without Watson again. And Jaden Reed missed practice today. He's got a new injury in addition to the chest injury he's been dealing with for most of the past month. He's got a toe injury that he left early from last week's game. So if there's no Watson and no Jaden Reed, I got issues with Jordan Love this week. So I'm going to go with Baker, as hard as it is to kind of say. So I will go with T, I will go with Puka, and I will go with Baker, money maker, at the quarterback position. And again, appreciate your super chat, Eric. Draco, what is going on? Starting CMC, ETN, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Ayuk, flexing Hall, flex Hall, Garrett Wilson, or JT. This is where it gets tough because it's like I said, Garrett Wilson's a jack in the box. And I feel the same way by Breece Hall. That's because they're both a product of their own environment. And their environment is crap. The Jets offense is crap, and I always say it's getting worse, but then they bounce back. They have a good game like they did against the Texans. I do think it is getting worse, though. They've got nothing to play for at this point. They've got nothing to play for. So there's a very strong distaste they have for the Jets players right now, to be honest. They've got a stink on them a little bit. Jonathan Taylor is a little higher in my rankings this week because I do think if Jonathan Taylor plays, the offense is just so much better run. And the matchup is just as good. I mean, the matchup against the Falcons is great too. So if Jonathan Taylor plays, I'll go with Jonathan Taylor. If he doesn't play, I'll go with Breece Hall because I love Breece Hall's upside. He's always capable of getting a big play. It's really flip a coin between him and Garrett Wilson. They're very much in the same tier as far as my overall rankings are on a weekly basis here. So I would go with JT if he plays, Hall if he doesn't play. Appreciate the super chat. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and sign off tonight. What you'll see tomorrow, running back rankings, top 30 for week 16, and kicker rankings as well. So thank y'all for being here. Appreciate y'all being in here with me tonight. Please go down there, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel to show your support. Patreon, the link is in the chat right there. It's pinned. If you have interest, I know for a fact you're going to get value out of it. So take a look at the tiers. Let me know what you think either way. And again, appreciate y'all being here. Take it easy. I'll see y'all in tomorrow's videos.